Welcome to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping industries in a language everyone can understand. Here is your host, Neil C. Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where I'm currently attending the Cisco live event here in Las Vegas. Now, a few of you might have seen my antics on a really cool tour of the home of Las Vegas Raiders and all the tech behind the scenes, such as 1,800 wireless access points, a tour of the Network Operations Center, or NOC, to you techies, and also the media room. And yes, I did pose for some cheeky pics for social media of me in various poses around the ground. But in the last 24 hours, I've seen how technology is bringing American football to life and solving real problems in the education industry too. But what about Formula One? More specifically, McLaren Racing. This is a topic that I want to explore today because I think it's another one of those areas that you don't associate with technology, but you're completely being transformed by it. I don't want to reveal any spoilers, so buckle up, hold on tight as I beam your ears all the way to Vegas, where Ed Green, Head of Commercial Technology at McLaren Racing, is waiting to speak with us today. So a massive warm welcome to the show, Ed. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Yes, I'm Edward Green. I work for McLaren Racing and my role is Head of Commercial Technology. And I get to wear a couple of different hats. One is integrating all of our technical partners into the racing team. And that's everybody from all of our technical folk, including Cisco, Cico and Webex, and the likes of Google included within that, and how they sort of come into the racing team. And really it's about partnerships that add performance. We don't just want stickers on the car. We truly don't do that. We really want to find ways that the team can go faster or be more efficient. And then the second hat I get to wear is looking across those technical series and starting to look at some of our roadmaps and what might be coming next and that we can embed into the team.
It's an incredibly cool role you've got there. And yesterday I learned about a school in Denver that's being transformed by technology, and even saw the technology behind the Las Vegas Raiders American football team. But today I want to take a look under the hood at McLaren, excuse the pun, and get people thinking about the role of technology in ways that they'd not thought of. So can you tell the listeners a little bit more about how important and far-reaching technology is in just about every aspect of what you do?
Yeah, so in the world of Formula One, data and technology sort of go hand in hand, and the sport we operate in is really made up of fine margins. We're talking hundreds of seconds between first and second place on the grid, and so you're dealing with all of these really fine data volumes, and you're trying to always find that competitive edge, or marginal gains as sometimes it's referred to. And so in the sport, when the cars head out on track, they're about to head out to Montreal this weekend. Both Lando and Daniel will carry roughly about 300 sensors on their car each. And those 300 sensors can transmit data at anything from 10 hertz up to 100 hertz. That's 100,000 times a second. We might be reading a data point on the car. And so over the course of a race weekend, we generate for each car about 1.5 terabytes of data. And so simply put, that's more data than humans could look at, and we don't really know what we could do with all of that. And so technology sits at the core of it. We've not only got to capture that information, store it, distribute it, crunch it for machine learning, put it into our neural networks and beyond. We've really got to look at how we can best make use of that data in order to make the cars go faster and find that competitive edge. And then during the week, we'll use that information to look into reliability and to check the cars are performing how they should be. And then come Sunday, it's all about that strategy and execution of where you want to be coming into the pits and seeing if you can get the undercut or overcut on your competitors, which is when you stay out a bit later than they do, or you try and come in earlier to get a more advantage lap time. But technology truly sits in the heart of what we do. And whilst the cars have those 300 sensors on them and they're collecting all that data at the track, and this weekend out in Montreal, all of that data gets shipped back to the head office. We've got McLaren Technology Centre in Woking in England, where all of that data comes from the track back to HQ. And at HQ, we have our own version of mission control. It's a little bit less Apollo 13, and it's a little bit more McLaren, and everyone's wearing their papaya, and it's a beautiful white room. It's very calm and cool, and away from the track, all the decisions happen. So technology and information and communications are absolutely essential to making sure that we can run the cars as efficiently as possible.
And I suppose a lot of armchair critics will always say, well, motor racing is all about who's got the best car, but it's not, is it? It's about those marginal gains and the technology too, right?
Yeah, you need that technology to underpin it. And those marginal gains are, you could spend weeks, if not months, developing a new floor for the car that's only going to gain you 0.02 of a second. But you combine that with developments on the front wing or other parts of the car that you'll be looking at, and that can stack up, and our sport is really fine. The difference between the front of the grid and the back of the grid is 4%. Wow. So it's really small. But over the course of a race, that 4% can play out into quite a big margin. And so we're always looking to find ways we can improve the car. And it truly becomes quite multidisciplinary internally. And everyone relies upon technology right from the point at which we conceive an idea for the car and we put it through computational fluid dynamics running on high-performance compute clusters, all the way into our wind tunnel, where we actually 3D print all of the models that go into the wind tunnel. We smelt them down to get this resin back. So, we try and make it as a sustainable process as possible. And if the, CFD world and the world of the wind tunnel look really good, those parts go into production, and then it's really important for us. So, making sure we've got reliability across our organization to transfer all this data throughout everything we do, to keep it secure as well at times. F1, can take a lot of inspiration from other teams. You can take photos of each other's cars down the grid. But making sure we've got all that information together in one place and people can access it reliably is critical come Sunday afternoon.
It's incredibly cool. And a question I've got to ask, I suspect you can't reveal too much, maybe a teaser, but is there any new tech that you're working on at the moment that you are able to share? I'm sure there's lots that you can't share, but is there any you can?
Yeah, so we tend to think about our new innovations in 3 areas. One is efficiency. So is there something that we can make happen much faster? The second is scale. Is there a problem that's so big that we're trying to throw more people at it, and therefore can we use tech to bring the scale down? And the third is a complexity challenge, or correlations, and that's really where the kind of AI and machine learning plays. I think one area we're definitely looking into, and we've kind of been inspired by some of the work we've seen with the team at Webex in doing the voice translations, is we're trying to see if maybe we could, all the radio messages are broadcast and accessible to all the teams, and we're trying to see maybe if we could, put that voice technology through a speech-to-text program and recognise commands that are common to drivers on the radio. So, for example, in order to bring the car into the pit lane, the word box, box, box is used. It's a good phonetic word. You don't say come into the pits. It's too long to say, and sometimes you make that decision very quickly. So box, box, box is nice and quick, and it's good phonetics over the radio. And so we're trying to see maybe if we could listen and take that. Could we do speech-to-text translation and get a little bit more of a competitive edge? And it's actually something we do today, but we do it with volunteers. So anybody from someone in the post room through to somebody on the graduate program through to colleagues in IT can volunteer on a Sunday afternoon, and they would sit there and transcribe some of that messaging as we hear those radio messages coming in from other teams. But that whole process, when you factor in the humans listening, we've got to get the information from track, and our links, our MPLS links out to the track can be 100 milliseconds, so that's bidirectional. Then you've got to process that as the human brain, connect it, type it out on the keyboard. Then the system's got to learn and recognize what the keywords are and then flag it up on the system. That could be, as much as 10 seconds. And so if we could even shorten that to 8 or 4 seconds, that, if we could really push it that far, that could be a huge advantage on track, because, those seconds really do count. So, those are some of the things we're thinking about that, we want to sort of have technology there to help people make decisions.
And there's a word you've mentioned a few times today, and that's innovation. So can you tell me more about the culture of innovation across McLaren? Because I would imagine it's something that you're all very passionate about.
Yeah, I think, it's tough. Now in our sport, there's currently something called a cost cap that's been introduced. And I think it's a really, beneficial introduction for our sport. And it's put a cap on the spend that teams can have. So in the past, some of the bigger teams that you'd see at the top of the grid at the moment were spending close to $500 million per year on their development of their cars. And other teams maybe around the sort of, half that mark. And so the disparity you'd get on the grid was, or where you'd see how fast cars were, was almost because it was a spend game, not because it was a technical innovation or a intellectual property game, which I think Formula One often is now. Yeah. So they've introduced this idea of a cost cap, and so currently we have $140 million operating cost. Certain aspects are held outside that, such as our power unit, our drivers, and some of our executive management team sit outside that cap. But truly, that's come in to help the sport be more efficient. And so now more than ever, listening to innovation in the team is really important, because those are the areas that are going to help us push forward, where we've got a finite amount of resource. Often everyone thinks, Formula One, you can just go and buy everything off the shelf and you must get the latest kit from all of your partners. And that's not true. Everything we do has to be accounted for fairly within that cost cap. We really have to spend our dollars wisely. And that's why we look for really good partnerships to help us do that across Formula One. So yeah, lots of areas of innovation. I think As a team, we try and embrace it. We don't try and sort of, I'd rather celebrate the 9 out of 10 failures than focus on the one success. I think it's better to spend time looking at, where things went wrong than just, that wasn't good enough and move on to the next thing. I think it's a really important part for us as a team.
100% with you on that. And elsewhere, I was also reading that esports is something that you're all very passionate about at McLaren, and there's so much growth in that area at the moment. But can you tell me more about what you're seeing there? And is it something that excites you as well?
Massively excites me. Yeah. So it's one of the first projects I started on when I joined McLaren, and still to this day, I love being involved in it. It's a proper technical head scratch. Yeah. And so there was 2 moments, 2 stories within the esports world to share. The first was when I joined McLaren, we had an esports tournament with 10 racers on the stage, so 10 gaming PCs. And in order to do the TV production behind it and in order to do the adjudication, we also then had to have 10 further PCs joining the game, watching those drivers play, joined by a further 4 PCs to do the director's views. And so suddenly there was these 24 gaming PCs sat around our theatre stage in the office, which we've got this incredible event space. But the networking requirements just to get those 24 machines chattering away, calling out to the internet, coming back, actually started to become a little bit, F1 weekend-esque, where we'd, be sending hardware to the track and we travel with an IT rig that's 238U cabinets in a shock absorbent mounted system. And suddenly it started to creep across into the world of this virtual racing. And so whilst they were racing virtually, we were having a very similar setup that we'd experienced in the F1 world. And that really got us thinking. We were then starting to monitor the performance of some of the PCs on stage. It was a little bit of a headache that evening when one of the game developers pushed an update of 100 gig, and suddenly we had, 2.5 terabytes worth of updates to pull across the network. And, now I'm seeing esports evolve. The instructions used to be written for your home router of how to configure it locally at your home. And now I think businesses are starting to see, it's becoming a little bit more enterprise. There's, security groups being developed on our network to house the gaming side of the business. And it's no longer cybersecurity locking down every single gaming website. So that's really interesting. And then the second moment for me when I sort of really understood, what gaming was all about was during the pandemic. I think what happens when you're racing these virtual games is actually they produce a lot of data, which is very, very similar to the real F1 car. Mm-hmm. And so we figured out that you could plug in a UDP stream and take that data out and start to analyze it in much the same way you would the F1 car. And so, whilst Lando and at the time Carlos, who was our other driver before Daniel Ricciardo came in, these guys were racing remotely at home. And so, I ended up dropping some hardware around to Lando's house so we could monitor his home PC. He had a second PC doing a Twitch stream. And suddenly during the pandemic, whilst everything was on lockdown, I was sat in my dining room at home with my new makeshift desk, and suddenly more screens popped up to monitor the online feed, and another screen popped up to monitor the data coming from his machine. And suddenly I started to think, this is a bit sort of F1 weekendish. Now we're starting to monitor the drivers and we're monitoring the data. And it started to make me think, actually, we're replicating, what we do in the real world now in an esports world. And I think it's a really fascinating and exciting arena for people. And more so, it's really accessible. Formula One is a hard sport to get into. And don't get me wrong, a gaming PC and a pair of wheels and pedals and a gaming seat are not cheap, but they're really accessible and people can have a go and, they can learn their own data or they can get involved with friends. And I think it's a really good part of our sport and great that the current roster of drivers all enjoy esports and seem to do sort of lots of exciting things with it.
And with you working right in the heart of this and all that gear is on display, were you and your colleagues having a little play on there? And how did you fare in that, if you did?
Yeah, and naturally we all have a go. We've just built an esports studio at our office, and it's open at lunchtime for people to go and have a go. It's a good way to relax. And I was gaming on there one day trying to master Monza, and this voice next to me said, "No, you need to take that corner in second gear," and it was Lando next to me playing as well. And so I think I had a few more driver rage turned on than he did. But we all love it. We're all really competitive at McLaren. Everyone behaves as a team, and it's nice to let your hair down and have a bit of fun. I will admit I've definitely bought the wheels and pedals for home, and so I try and see how close I can get, lapping around Silverstone. But it's great when you get the opportunity to drive them. When you go to the circuit, it feels much more real. You understand the corners and the layout, and I'm certainly never going to be in the seat of the real car, but it's nice to get a sense of what it might be like.
What a great story. Love that. And of course, another big talking point at the moment is sustainability. So can you tell me a little bit more about how you're using technology to improve sustainability? Because as I said, it's a very big talking point, isn't it, right now? And it's something that's important to you guys too.
Yeah, I think, firstly, sustainability is one of those things where you can always do more and learn more. And I think, it's an area that data can play a really important part in. And for me, it's taking that ethos of the F1 team where we capture data to understand the reliability of the car. We capture data to understand the performance. We capture data to build our strategy. And actually, that's very similar to what we want to do as a business in the world of sustainability. And that data in Formula One isn't for dashboards that end up in monthly reporting packs. That data is used live in action. And so I think that's what we want to take forward and look at in the sustainability world, is how do we take data that's live in action for people to make decisions? And so we sort of say, data for decisions, not data for dashboards, and really try and get people thinking and seeing, if I saw that number move, what would I change? What would I do in my day job? And so, at the moment, there's lots of building management systems, lots of complex networking, and we're trying to sort of crawl across and start to look at it. I think on the racing front, actually, Formula One's been a bit of a force of good for change and innovation. We sort of keep coming back to that word. But things like energy recovery systems or kinetic energy recovery, or KERS as it's referred to in Formula One, that recovers kinetic energy as you brake, as you slow the car down. You can recover that energy and store it up into a battery. Now in racing, we use that to go much faster, right? We use it to try and overtake our competitors and go a little bit quicker down the straights. But in road cars, this is now commonplace. As you brake your hybrid electric road car, you regenerate energy that then feeds the battery, which gives you longer range or better mileage, or helps improve efficiency. And that was a technology sort of born out of Formula One. And so I think there's definitely a place for it to continue to drive innovation and continue to excite people. But as a team, there's more we can do, and we've now, luckily, we've got 2 electric series. We've just announced our entry into Formula E with an acquisition of a team, and we're now into our first season of Extreme E, which is a 4x4 off-road battery series. And that's a really interesting series. It's really challenging how we think about going racing. All of the cars are transported via ship, so the races are less frequent. The off-road rally cars, it's an equally gender-balanced team, which is incredibly exciting to have our first ever female driver, but our 2 lead engineers and performance engineers are all female. So great to see that coming in as well. And even your cups and plates that you have during the weekend, you have to take and wash up yourself. So a little bit different to the world of Formula One. On the F1 side as well, we're good at simulations. We did simulate out, our logistics and worked out it was more efficient for us to increase the amount of hardware we'd purchase. We'd offset that saving by shipping it around the world instead of flying it around the world. And so now we really have a minimal footprint that we fly. But certainly more we can do, and I hope we sort of keep pushing ourselves and keep asking the hard questions to see what more we can do in that space.
And of course, everything that we've talked about so far is all centred around technology. And although you guys are obviously experts in this area, it's something that you can't do completely on your own. So how important is it to find the perfect tech partner for a team like McLaren? Because I don't know where you would begin in a process like that.
Yeah, I think, first, when you look at the partners we have in Formula One, you have to have the best technology. So there's no room for taking a gamble. And truly, you've got to have the best technology to go racing. Secondly, we're a really lean team. Actually, McLaren's only about sort of 750 people. It's increased a little bit now with the addition of the new racing series. And as a result, IT is a really lean part of the organisation. There's maybe 18 of us that look after IT. But we've got an incredibly literate IT organisation. There's people in aerodynamics that can write really good code, and there's people in the strategy team, building applications and software. And so our mantra and sort of thought process as a team is to find really passionate partners like the team at Cisco and like the team at Webex that want us to go faster on track, that want us to be better and really want to help push us. But also to build platforms that the business can consume. And we've really seen the benefit of taking that sort of platform approach, whether or not it's in our compute and server architectures where we build those platforms that people can come and consume, or with products like Webex, where now that becomes our hot desk booking, and it becomes our room analytics, and it becomes our conferencing platform all in one, rather than buying bespoke one-off-the-shelf products that fit that bill. And so truly, you've got to go and find really passionate partners that want you to go racing. You've got to find partners with a big ecosystem, because it's a complex landscape. You've all got to talk to each other. But yeah, more than anything, I think we're really lucky to have the partner group we do. And I think they're all very excited and very passionate about making us go faster, which makes getting into the office every day a pretty exciting opportunity.
So what would you say you're most proud of when you think of that relationship between Cisco and McLaren, and what are you able to deliver together in ways that you couldn't do on your own?
I think half of it is the technology, and looking forward at our roadmap. We've got a quite aging network architecture, so we're going through a process at the moment of trying to modernise that and bring in some of the best practice and start to look at what we can do to bring in elements of automation, give us better assurance, far better visibility during a race weekend. So I'm excited by that, but I'm also excited about how passionate the team are getting about the opportunities of working with Cisco. So a couple of team members are out here this weekend looking at DevNet and trying to work through those programs. Other team members that are more sort of hardcore and focused on the networking side of things. They're excited to see some of the innovations coming from the enterprise networking and cloud side of the business. So for me, I'm as excited about how the teams are reacting to it as the actual technology itself, and I think it gives people a really good learning path and a really good option. So, whilst the roadmap is exciting and seeing things like DNA Center and some of the latest switches and moving to multi-gig to the desktop, all of that sort of stuff is really exciting, and great to hear some of the innovations with Catalyst appearing into the sort of Meraki dashboard type world. I'm also excited that it's giving people an opportunity to learn. I think that the way they can learn around Cisco and what it gives them as part of their career is awesome as well, because attracting and retaining talent is a challenge in any business. Although Formula One on the outside seems like a very attractive place to work, we have 22 races this season. Next year we'll have 23. We'll be coming out here back to Vegas to go racing next year. In IndyCar we've got 17 races, in Extreme E 5 races, and a whole load more with Formula E coming on board. So it's a really busy schedule, and you're working at the weekends when people are watching these. So you've got to keep people motivated with technology, and they don't want to be hassled all the time by not able to control what's going on or being falling behind. And so I think having that as part of their toolkit and what they're doing in their day job certainly helps.
Yeah, and you were talking about how your team are excited. I've spoke to several people from Cisco, and I know that excitement's with them as well, and they want to push harder and see what's possible.
Yeah, it's definitely both ways as well. We take on some of the new areas of innovation. We've had the hologram pod at the office for a little while now, and sometimes you're taking on technology that's not yet proven out, and you've got to share that joint risk. And I think that's about sort of true partnership. So some stuff we can't talk about, but some also, the things like hologram that we've had at the office for a little while now is really getting people excited and making them think differently about how they'd manufacture, parts in the future, for example.
And what's next for McLaren? Where do you go from here? Again, I appreciate you can't share too much, but is there anything you can leave us with?
I think, with a really busy race calendar coming up, we've got to look for new ways to be more efficient. I think, there'll become a weekend in the future where we could have 5 races on the go at any one point in time. And we can't all be in 5 places at once. So, it's really bringing some, better capabilities, more assurance, really sort of strengthening up what we've got, which I'm looking forward to. I think we're always looking to see what's next on the horizon. I think Zach's got some really big ambitions. Things like Netflix have made life pretty popular in the office, and certainly even helped my own family understand what I do for a job, which is nice. But I'd say watch this space and see what's coming next.
And I'm not sure if there is any way you can point anyone listening to, but if anyone wanted to find out more information about the relationship, about the work, or even contact a member of your team to explore how it could work in their world, is there any way you could point the listeners to? Awesome. Well, I cannot thank you enough for joining me on the podcast today. And I think everyone kind of imagines there'll be a lot of technology around McLaren, but not to the extent that you've mentioned today. And the kind of the vast quantities of data and network bandwidth is just phenomenal. But thank you so much for sharing that with me today.
No, thanks.
One of my aims of this podcast and reasons why I travel to these events is to demystify technology, simplify it, put it in a language everyone can understand, but also get everyone thinking differently by showcasing stories from industries that you don't associate with technology and hear about the difference that it is making. And that's why I try to bring you a different story from a different industry every single day. And you've heard from me and Edward Green today from McLaren Racing. But Did anything resonate with you in particular? Do you have a story that you'd like to share or any insights you'd like to offer? Please email me now, techblogwriter@outlook.com, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn at Neil C. Hughes. I'm the easiest person in the world to find. Whether you want to send a written communication or just send me an audio message and we'll feature you on the show. If you've got a question, if you'd like to come on, whatever it is, please keep them coming over. But that's it for today's episode. So a big thank you for listening as always. And until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neil C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.